Well, to talk more about Yemen, Andreas Krieg is a professor in defence studies at King's College in London. Let's cross live to him. Mr. Krieg, thanks very much for speaking to us. I mean, there are some who have said, you know, ahead of these talks, no breakthrough should be expected. It's about averting, war out of the port of Hodeidah. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, I mean, we have to bear in mind that we're really starting from a very, very low point here. We're at a point where, you know, we can't expect great strategic decisions. We have to understand the war in Yemen is a very, very complex, multipolar war involving a variety of domestic actors, a variety of external actors as well who are not represented. So this is very much a war between, which concentrates, this entire negotiations are concentrating on the war between the Houthis and the Hadi government, and it's really trying to build up confidence from a very technical point of view before really touching upon the more touchy subjects, on the more controversial subjects that would cause more outrage on both sides. So I think at the moment, the strategy of the mediators is to not actually bring the two parties together. They are physically in the same place, but they're not sitting around the table. They're really not directly talking to each other, but mediators are trying to build up confidence, and confidence measures can be brought in. And I think over the last couple of weeks, we have seen a couple of these already playing out. One of them was a prisoner swap earlier on, and I think it's been a breakthrough, which was announced a couple of hours ago, that they agreed to a couple of thousands of prisoner swaps. I think that's a great first attempt. So, you know, we should be very cautious in saying this is a major breakthrough, but it's definitely going into the right direction, and we need to be positive about it instead of just saying, oh, it's just a tiny little thing in the wider, bigger scheme of things of what's going on in Yemen. So I think we're going in the right direction.
Mr. Krieg, there are those who say that, you know, these calls for peace could essentially lead to more violence. Is that a possibility as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I mean, violence is still ongoing. I mean, despite certain commitments by the Houthis to stop firing ballistic missiles and somewhat a commitment by the Saudi-Emirati alliance to stop airstrikes, violence is continuing. The operation to take Hodeidah is continuing. And there is an aspect to this which we shouldn't forget. For the Houthis themselves, as the leadership, they are tired of the war, but they are willing to continue fighting because they're actually not experiencing the hardship that the people of Yemen are experiencing. And the same is true for the Emiratis and the Saudis and their proxies on the ground. I think when we actually just look at the warring factions, I think all these warring factions are willing to continue fighting and using this as a way to, you know, basically making concessions to the West and saying, we are meeting concessions to the UN, we are talking to each other, but we're still trying to gain and make gains on the battlefield. And I think this is continuing. I think the Saudi-Emirati coalition and their proxies on the ground are still trying to change the balance of power on the ground before a particular settlement. So these negotiations can also work in many ways as a way to stall the war and to make further gains on the battlefield.
Given the, as you say, the complexity of this, given the fact that it's a proxy war essentially, what's the best case scenario that we could expect to come out of these talks in Sweden?
I think what we need here is confidence between the Hadi government and the Houthis. And confidence is very important because this entire conflict is based on mistrust. And I think trust building is absolutely essential in this. And we need to build this up from a technical point of view, looking at prisoner swaps. The Houthis have somewhat signaled that they might agree to the UN taking over Hodeidah, but I'm very skeptical about this. And then you can build up on that. Hodeidah is already a very controversial issue. The Houthis need to trust that the other side will actually keep their promises, because they haven't in the past. Plus, the Hadi government, we shouldn't forget the Hadi government is in exile. So they are sitting on the negotiation table, but really they're speaking on their own behalves. But they don't really control matters on the other side in Yemen, because these matters are controlled by proxies of the Emiratis and the Saudis. And we shouldn't forget that the Southern Transitional Council that the Emiratis have built up over the last couple of years have nothing to do really with the Hadi government. They're actually anti-Hadi government. So they're also also not represented. So there are a bunch of spoilers that are there that could potentially bring violence to bear as they please, despite the fact that an agreement can be reached in Stockholm. But this is as good as it gets. We have to start where we are right now, and then hope that from this trust building, the bigger parties, particularly Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, will invest and keep their side of the promise in order to signal to the Houthis that there is an inclusive deal in the making. And inclusive means, if we look at a more strategic solution to the Yemen war, it means all these different parties, Al-Islah included, the Muslim Brotherhood group, the Houthis, the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Hadi government, and the Southerners, just to mention a few of the players, being representative in order to create a holistic solution for Yemen.
Okay, Andreas Krieg speaking to us from London. Thanks for your time today.